Hebrews chapter 5. For every priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in matters relating to Elohim, to offer both gifts and offerings for sins. Right? Every priest taken from among men is appointed on behalf of men in matters relating to Elohim, to offer both gifts and offerings for sins. Being able to have a measure of feeling for those not knowing and being led astray, since he himself is also surrounded by weakness. So the priest, as he is taken from among men, knows what it is to be a human and to have weakness. And he himself is surrounded by weakness. So then it says, and on account of this, he has to offer for sins. As for the people, so also for himself. That's why the high priest not only had to offer the sacrifices for the people, but also for himself, because he would also have sin. He will be surrounded by weakness. In fact, we see in the book of Leviticus 16, when he talks about the feast of Yom Kippur, in the feast of Yom Kippur, the sacrifices that were made were a male goat for Yahweh that was fulfilled by Mashiach, an ox, and a ram. So let me just check this out here, because that's, I guess, well, it goes with this that we're seeing, and it's important. Leviticus 16. I'll read it quickly. And Yahweh said to Moshe, speak. Well, I'm not going to read the whole thing, just certain pieces. And Yahweh said to Moshe, speak to Aharon, your brother, not to come in at all times to the set apart place. Just a second. Here it is. With this, Aharon should come into the set apart place with the blood of a young bull, the ox, as a sin offering, and of a ram as an ascending offering. So the young bull represents the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth, the ox, descendant of Yosef, and of a ram that represents Eliyahu, the other witness, Revelation 11, as an ascending offering. That's verse, just a second, verse 3. Let me see in Hebrew, Leolah. Leolah, when it says ascending offering, is referring to a offering of fire that ascends as smoke once it is burned. Then let me see something else. And from the congregation of the children of Israel, he takes 2 male goats as a sin offering. So you see that there was a bull as a sin offering, and male goats as sin offering. These 2 were represented, or fulfilled, I should say, by Barabbas and Yahushua, when Pilate put them 2 in front of the people and asked, who do you want me to free? And they asked for Barabbas. And then he said, and what do you want me to do with Yahushua? And they said, sacrifice him. So, and from the congregation of the children of Israel, he takes 2 male goats as a sin offering and 1 ram as an ascending offering. That's why not only did Yahushua and Barabbas were there as those 2 male goats, but before Yahushua was killed, they had killed John the Baptist, who was Eliyahu, as Mashiach said, therefore the ram. And Aharon shall bring the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself. So you see how he just mentioned Aharon shall bring the bull, and the people shall bring the goat, because Yahushua died for the sins of the people. The last dies to help the people. Well, there's many things that I want to say, but in a way for his own sins, of course, because he comes as a prodigal son. So in a way, through that death, he pays for it. Yet, obviously, he believes in Mashiach, so he is forgiven through Mashiach in order to be able to be presented as an offering, right? Yahushua has no sin. He is the high priest. So he doesn't need a sacrifice for his for himself. Yet remember that Yahushua came to give testimony of the Father, and he said that there would be one who would give testimony of him. And that is when Yahushua went up, then the Father goes down again as the last to give witness, to give testimony of Yahushua, the first, the Son. So the Son gives testimony of the Father. And then in the end times, the Father gives testimony of the Son. And the first came as the male goat, the last comes as the bull. So one for sins that were done in ignorance, and the other one for the sins that were not done in ignorance. So, and Aharon shall bring the bull as a sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house. So that means that the last dies for himself and for the 144,000 who are his house, because they become his spiritual children. So the bull was a sin offering for the high priest and for his house. And he shall take the two goats and let them stand before Yahweh at the door of the tent of appointment. And Aharon shall cast lots for the two goats, one lot for Yahweh and the other lot for Azazel. That is Barabbas, what Barabbas represented. And Azazel is the one who is going to come out and become the false Messiah, the other goat, the evil one. And Aharon shall bring the goat on which the lot for Yahweh fell, and shall prepare it as a sin offering. But the goat on which the lot for Azazel fell is caused to stand alive before Yahweh, to make atonement upon it, to send it into the wilderness to Azazel. And Aharon shall bring the bull of the sin offering, which is for himself, and make atonement for himself and for his house, and shall slay the bull as the sin offering, which is for himself. You see how he repeats it once again and again and again to understand what it is being explained in Hebrews, but also why the last also has to come and die, even though Mashiach already did come and die, and how Mashiach came and died for the sins, yet the bull is also for a sin offering, because there would be two types of sin. I repeat, conscious sin and unconscious. So when people sin ignorantly, or when they sin knowing what they are doing, and they shall slay the bull at the sin offering, which is for himself, and shall take a fire holder filled with burning coals of fire from the slaughter place before Yahweh, with his hands filled with sweet incense bitten fine, and shall bring it inside the veil. Let me see what else. Okay. Then he says, and he shall slay the goat of the sin offering. That was the sacrifice of Mashiach, which is for the people, right? For the nation. That's why the people, when Pilate asked them, what do you want me to do with Yahushua? They sacrifice him. Let his blood fall on us and our children, right? On the people. They were doing it in a rebellious way, but they didn't know that they were prophesying that the people needed to be covered with the blood of Mashiach, as the goat right here. And he shall slay the goat of the sin offering, which is for the people, and shall bring its blood inside the veil, and shall do with that blood as did with the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it on the lid of atonement and in front of the lid of atonement. So it needed two types of blood to bring atonement. That is the blood of Mashiach and the blood of the last, known as the prophet like Moshe. And well, it continues and it's very powerful when we see every single detail. In the Midrash of Leviticus, Vayikra, it is explained, the whole ritual is explained, and it is said that when they would kill the bull, they would put the blood in a vessel, and one of the priests had to continue to move the the blood within the vessel. Um, and then when they would kill the male goat, they would bring the blood and mix it with the blood of the uh, ox or the bull, and it will become one blood. And that is to represent that once both die, they will become one, as it is prophesied in Ezekiel 37 and Zechariah 49. All right, so going back to Hebrews. And on account of this, he has to offer for sins as for the people, so also for himself. So what was the sacrifice for the people? The male goat. And for himself, the bull, right? So also it is written that Yahweh subjected everything to the feet of Mashiach. He gave everything to Mashiach. But now he himself needs to be subjected to Yahweh. And that's why he would come first and last. First, for everything to be subjected to him, and last, for him to be subjected to the Most High. And on account of this, he has to offer for sins as for the people, so also for himself. And no one obtains this esteem for himself, but he who is called by Elohim, even as Aharon also was. And no one obtains this esteem for himself, but he who is called by Elohim, even as Aharon also was. Right? He was called by Yahweh to become the high priest and representation of Mashiach in that case. Aharon means he who brings the light. In the negative sense, is pretty much the same meaning as Lucifer. So in the negative sense, it refers to the Leviticus, to the earthly priesthood, the Levite, the the shadow, the representation of. But obviously, Yahushua is the light. So it would be referring to the fact that Aharon, as the high priest, represented the light that would come eventually to fulfill that which Aharon was shadow of. So, and no one obtains this esteem for himself, but he who is called by Elohim, even as Aharon also was. So also the Messiah did not extol himself to become high priest, but it was he who said to him, "You are my son. Today I have brought you forth." As he also says in another place, "You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek." So he came from the tribe of Yehudah to become the high priest according to the order of Melchizedek, because Levi is the tribe of the earthly order, the priesthood of this reality. And he also says in another place, "You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and petitions with strong crying and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his reverent fear, thought, though being a son," I'll read it again, "who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and petitions with strong crying and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his reverent fear, though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered." So, since Mashiach is the son, he had to obey the Father, coming to the earth and being willing to die for all his creation, because all of the creation was subjected to vanity because of the sin that Adam and Eve and all humanity committed. So he had to come to the earth in the flesh and obey and suffer. And the fact that he was willing to suffer, and he did, is what taught him obedience, or not taught him, but completed. Because I'm not, and I say that in the sense that he didn't need to. Well, even though it is written right here, he learned, right? But he knew everything. My point is, the experience made him understand what he already knew, and what he already was willing to do through the experience. He completed it. He fulfilled it. He manifested it. He confirmed what he is. So, though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered. My point is that, well, he suffered at the very end, yet he was obedient the whole time. But that suffering was what completed everything. And obviously, it is harder to be obedient when everything is going bad. It's harder to be obedient when everything goes a different way than what you would like when you are suffering, right? So if you're suffering and you're still obedient, that's wonderful. Because a lot of people act obedient while everything is nice and they have uh, money and well, everything that they think they need and everything that they think makes them happy. But if those things are taken away, then that's when it's harder, and that's when a lot of people just stop being obedient, and therefore they were never obedient. They were just um acting that way to keep what they had. Though being a son, he learned obedience by what he suffered, and having been perfected, right? Completed, because perfection is completion. When something is complete, it is perfect. Once it lacks a little bit, it's not perfect anymore. And that's what basically perfection means in Hebrew. And having been perfected, he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him. So since everybody would have to obey him, then he himself gave us the example by obeying Yahweh, even going through what he went through, so that we have the example and cannot complain about anything, even though we might. And having been perfect, he became the causer of everlasting deliverance to all those obeying him, having been designated by Yahweh a high priest. Having been designated by Yahweh a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. So you see, once again, the scriptures are calling him the high priest. Yahushua is not calling him king yet, right? Because that the king part has to be fulfilled in the end. Concerning whom we have much to say and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. Yep. Concerning whom we have much to say, right? Concerning Melchizedek, concerning Yahushua as the high priest, and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Yahweh. This is sad, yet it is also important, because you see how, you remember the last time somebody asked me about when Mashiach said, and do not call anybody teacher, right? Uh, because one is your teacher. Yes, but see what he says here. For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, so there are many teachers, right? But all those teachers should respect and follow and learn from the one teacher, Yahushua HaMashiach. But more than that, Yahushua came as the teacher. For indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again. What does that mean? The second manifestation. The last coming as a teacher, the good shepherd. You need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Yahweh, and you have become such as need milk and not solid food. This is sad and it's so clear. And um remember when I was in when I had the chance to go to Venezuela a few days ago. um I mean, these words right here were so clear, even though they are clear in every way, but they became so uh, pretty much manifested uh when we had the chance. And I guess some of you guys don't know, but I'll just make it short. We had the chance to go to a mountain that they call the mountain of fast and prayer. Well, fasting and prayer, something like that. And they gave me the chance to speak. They were going to give me the chance to speak twice or three times, perhaps, but at least twice. And the first time, they couldn't take it, and they were very angry. Like, well, not all of them, but like half, maybe a little bit less than half, were very angry. I could see in their faces. um, and they were so upset because of what they were hearing, even though all the time I was using scriptures. Everything I was saying it with the scriptures. Scripture, scripture, scripture. We, and I say we because it was a group of us from the congregation, five of us. We only used scripture to say everything. We were the ones that used scripture the most during the time we were there. Every preacher that preached while we were there only used one verse, two verses, and then spoke for an hour. The time I spoke, it was like 70% scriptures, the rest explaining the scriptures that I read. And they were so angry, and they would ask questions, and they wouldn't allow me to answer. And before I could answer, they would ask another question, and it was a mess. And even though I would answer, then they would ask the same question or a question that made clear that they didn't understand the answer I just gave. For instance, when they say, "So you mean that everybody that didn't know the name went to hell?" Which is like very common. And I would say, "No, not at all. This and that." And then they would say the same thing again. And I was like, "But I just told you no. What? I mean, it was so weird." And they got so angry that the pastor from there, from the place, got up and asked them, "I see that you're very upset, and that shows, well, that's good." He told them that shows that you're very weak in your foundation. Um, but because I love you guys, we're gonna do a vote. Who wants him to speak again, and who doesn't want him to speak again?" And a bunch of hands like this. And so he said, because of the love for these people, for this, they were all men. It was so sad. Uh, I mean, the weakness in those men. Um, so he said, because of these people, we're not gonna allow him to speak anymore. So they didn't allow me to speak again, and that was it. And those people that were there were supposed to stay there for 4 days, yet they left that same day because they were so angry. And supposedly the Almighty had told them to go there and stay there for 4 days, yet they left on the first day. So they disobey Yahweh, or what? I mean, or their mighty one, I guess, who told them to go there. And if they were told to go there, why wouldn't they listen to what they had to listen there? I mean, there were so many things that were so backwards in their thinking and their interpreting of scriptures and a bunch of things. And I mean, it was a huge experience, very amazing. But this is what happened. And even the pastor from that place um, didn't know how to read, but he would say very uh, well, I guess his wife would read the scriptures to him or something, but he did know a lot of scripture, even though he didn't know how to read. And so he would use certain things. And he did mention this. And it was amazing coming from him and all those people there listening to him, and they didn't get it. They were not ready for solid food. They wanted milk. And I even said, "What milk? I mean, they don't even want milk. They cannot even take milk." I was giving them milk, and they almost die of um maybe they were lactose intolerant. But I was giving them milk and they couldn't take the milk. It was so sad, so crazy how bad it is. And anyways, I had um we stayed till the time that we were going to stay, even though they didn't allow me to speak, and we heard them speak and preach, and everything that they preached after me was uh directed at me. Everything they preached was telling us, according to them, how wrong we were. Um, Yet they didn't realize that everything that they were preaching was actually against themselves. It was confirming what we were preaching. I mean, it was crazy. It was like another dimension. Um, but yeah, that is how Christianity is at the moment, sadly. Very, very sad. They don't want to hear it. And like I told you guys, we were gonna do a conference for like hundreds of people, and two sisters who prepared everything, worked on everything, invited a bunch of churches for the people to go there, and a bunch of them were going to go. Yet one pastor who had a lot of or has a lot of authority over there in Venezuela, well, in that place where we were, um, called them all and told them not to go. Didn't give them a reason, just not to go, and almost nobody went. So it was very frustrating spiritually because it was amazing to see how they themselves, well, like scripture says, they don't want to enter and they don't allow the rest to enter. Those who want to enter, they don't allow it. So, like I was saying, for indeed, although by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first elements of the words of Yahweh, and you have become such as need milk and not solid food. For everyone partaking of milk is inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food is for the mature whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. So I repeat that for everyone partaking of milk is experienced, I mean, inexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. Just like a baby can only drink milk and doesn't know anything about life, that's how most are in the world regarding the scriptures and the doctrine. But solid food is for the mature whose senses have been trained by practice, right? By putting the commandments to work, by fulfilling the commandments, by learning from scriptures and then practicing what they have learned, by experiencing life and then realizing through experience what's good and what's evil, what I should do and what I shouldn't do. But solid food is for the mature whose senses have been trained by practice to discern both good and evil. So, yeah, sadly, most people in the world are spiritual babes and need milk because they are inexperienced, because they haven't practiced the scriptures, they haven't studied the scriptures. So that's how the chapter ends.